Hi, Gil from Testing Gil here. Today we're going to talk about another aspect of test design, feasibility. This series is about different aspects of test design. So you need to remember that while we're talking on each one separately, we need to consider all of them together and discuss whatever their value and cost when we're coming to choose a design. When I talk about testability, it sounds like I'm talking about something which is either testable or not. But the truth is that everything is testable. If you're a developer, for example, you're building something. There must be a way to test whether it works or not, other than the let's hope it works. And as testers, we'd like to see if the behavior that we're seeing is as expected. Remember, does it work? The first question we ask. There's a whole video about this. You can watch it here. As we know, a design is a solution to a problem, and there can always be multiple solutions. Each one answers the question, does it work, differently, and each one has their own cost. So, when we're talking about feasibility, we're talking about levels of feasibility, and each level has its own cost. Before we jump into talking about costs, let's talk about the components of feasibility. Both are important and each one comes with its own cost. The first one is operability. When we're testing, we're trying to get the system into a state, to manipulate it to come to the state. Therefore, we need to operate it. Let's go to our bigger, better bookstore. We want to learn about the feature of buying a book. How does it work? Well, even before we try to answer the question, we need to prepare. Before we buy a book, there are a couple of things that need to be in the system. We need a user and a book, and we need money. Lots of money. And no questions about where it came from. We can do these things differently. We can use APIs or use the screen, or change things directly in the database, or using scripts. Setup is a big part of operability. Without the ability to get to the state we want, the buying part, the thing that we're actually interested in, is pointless. Let's look at an API example. If we're using APIs, these are the things that we need to do to prepare. Okay, this is the setup. The first API creates a user in the system. The second one pours money into the account, and the third one creates the book. Okay, now for the buying part. We'll need the following APIs. The first two APIs get the user and the book, the ones we set up in the preparation part. And the third one, the post, does the actual buying. From an API perspective, without these APIs, we can't really test buying a book. Is that all? No. But before we finish this, I want to talk about the other part of feasibility, observability. Yeah, I know I'm using big words today. Observability is a term that was actually hijacked from us by the DevOps people, but we're not bitter. Observability for us is the ability to observe the change. After all, we went while buying a book. How do we know if it succeeded, or even if it's failed? We can observe things in different ways. We can look at the screen, or use APIs. We can look directly in the database, or read logs. Whatever you got. So, for the API example, the final part will look like this. What we're doing is basically getting the user information and then the orders. And if we look at the orders, we'll see that the purchase succeeded or not. So far, so good. If we have these APIs, it's very easy to write a test and automate it. But what if the APIs are not there? Today we're talking about feasibility, and the feasibility is about access to the tools that we need. If we have these tools, like APIs, feasibility is high. Because we don't need to build these tools, we consider them cheap, maybe even free. So, if the APIs were built as part of the product, we'll be able to use them for free. But what happens if the APIs are not there? Then we go looking for alternatives. So, what are our options? First, we can use the screen, assuming we have screens. Another option we already talked about is setting data and looking at the change data in the database. But what happens if we don't know how to read a database? Or maybe we can use the screens manually, but we don't know how to automate it because we've never learned automation. This time, feasibility changes again, because costs are higher because they include a learning fee. There's another option. We can build the APIs to test the system. But even the cost of building this API can change. In a recent discussion with a client's testing team, I asked the testers, if you have a feature that you need to test, but you don't have APIs for that, would the developer write APIs for you? Their answer was interesting. They said that if the feature was developed in their team, where the developers, which they were part of the team, the developers would have no problem doing that for them. But if the feature that they wanted to test or operate by the APIs was developed by another team, then it was another story. If the developers on that team would have time, no problem. But if they didn't, they would need to change or discuss priorities, and sometimes it would not fit on the other team's priorities. So in this case, feasibility and its costs are not about what you need to build, the APIs, but also by who needs to build it. So when we're discussing whether a design is a viable design, we need to include the aspect of cost. And that price can be affected in many ways. Therefore, we should consider different options to find out which is the most feasible for us. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, share, and watch other videos on this channel. And in the comments, tell me how you evaluate different design alternatives, which you do. You do, right? Until next time, bye-bye.